Salut YouTube, welcome back to another video on the Not Even French channel. So nice to have you here. And today we are jamming on the topic signs you are becoming French. I'm a big believer that you can become French, like you're French in your soul, and you Francophiles out there know exactly what I am talking about. So whether you have lived in France, just visited France, or you just live that French way of life, this video is for you. It's all of the signs where you know that you are becoming French in your soul, kind of like me. I am back in New Zealand now after 6 years of living in France. I have so many French experiences and stories still to share, but something that hasn't left me is certain things in the French way, the French spirit that show up sometimes in my day-to-day, but definitely on a weekly basis that remind me that there's definitely a part of my heart still in France, and that the French culture and French behaviors have definitely rubbed off on me in a way that might stay with me forever. I mean, hopefully in some cases at least. So if you're a Francophile yourself and you love the French culture and language just like me, definitely hit subscribe. I'm putting out new content every week until I can get myself back to France. Hopefully as soon as the borders ease in New Zealand. My French husband and I will definitely be on the first plane out of here to visit France for at least a few months, so fingers crossed. But until then, for those of you who aren't there either, let's travel through memories, through videos, and through conversations just like this one. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So one of the signs where you know that you're becoming French is you develop this kind of quest for knowledge, this kind of thirst for knowledge and a more generalist education and perspective of the world. I've talked about this before on the differences between French and New Zealand schooling systems, but essentially French people grow up with a very broad education. They're encouraged to take topics like philosophy and art history and geography and many broad topics all the way throughout high school. And this also continues as well all the way into prepper, so preparatory school as well as universities. And then just in general, you know, with the exhibitions and the museums and the culture, French people tend to have a much higher degree of general knowledge, at least from my perspective, than what I was used to. So because they're well read and they're well cultured, I've noticed that they love sort of consuming facts about a new place. So for example, you know, they'll have la routade when they're traveling and they'll enjoy learning about the different facts of the area, the population size, the land area, that kind of thing. And when I arrived in France, they were asking me all sorts of questions about New Zealand that I didn't always have the answer to, like how tall is your highest mountain, and what's the length of the country, and what's your population, and what date exactly did the settlers start arriving, and all of these kinds of things around history. And they're just interested, they're curious, they like to consume facts. And in saying that, I know quite a few French people who like to play board games as well, and the board games are quite often general trivia, general knowledge kind of basis as well. I've seen that even in small French children. And I remember thinking to myself, how can I increase my general knowledge and consume knowledge faster than the average so that I can kind of get up to par and also have knowledge about a little bit of everything, right? A nice broad general knowledge. And this is a really good time to talk about today's video sponsor, Blinkist, because oh my gosh, I love this app so much. Essentially, Blinkist has taken a library of over 3,000 non-fiction books, so books about all sorts of topics. It can be about entrepreneurship, money and finances, health, relationships, productivity, anything self-development, non-fiction, anything that you want to learn more about, history, all sorts of stuff. It's probably on this app. But what's genius about it is that they take these books, and now they even do it with podcasts as well, and they consolidate it down into 15-minute info bites. So you can read or listen to the key learnings of the book. So I can go for a 30-minute run and I'll listen to 2 blinks, and I've essentially taken away the key information, the key learnings, the knowledge you need to know of 2 entire non-fiction books. The app is just such a joy to use as well. It's so intuitive and easy, and you can discover some amazing gems that get recommended to you as well. And you can make them available offline as well. So you can use them on the go and when you don't necessarily have internet access to, which is super cool, especially if you're traveling, commuting, all that good stuff. So a couple of books that I've read recently include include Atomic Habits by James Clear. I absolutely love this one. That's for anyone who's trying to break a bad habit or form a new habit. And it's all about the psychology behind sticking to things. So how you can stick to your new goal of working out more, eating better, anything you like. And another one that I enjoyed is White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo. That was really good as well, a really unique perspective on white people and racism. So thanks to Blinkist, the first 1,000 people to click my link down below are going to have a 7-day trial of the premium membership of Blinkist. Read all you can, consume all you can. It's going to be awesome. And of course you can cancel it anytime during that period. And if you absolutely love it, you will get 25% off the full membership as well while you're there. I hope you guys enjoy it, and it helps you to expand your knowledge and open your horizons just as it does for me. Now, I couldn't mention becoming French without mentioning food. And the next sign that you're becoming French is that you actually eat very regularly. So breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Minimal snacking, in fact usually no snacking at all, maybe something around 4 p.m. for the goûter. And then in terms of what you eat, you like to have a lot of whole foods, a lot of fresh produce, and you like to cook at home. So obviously there's a rise of takeouts and delivery services and all of that kind of thing all around the world, including France. But in general, I do find that French people prefer to cook from scratch and cook at home. And I know personally at home, for Niels and I, we eat at home and cook at home 99.9% of the time. We maybe eat out, get takeaways 2 times a month. Now this is definitely in stark contrast to the way I used to live in New Zealand before that, given, I mean, I was younger, I just finished being a student, but I would definitely get takeouts a lot more often than that. And I don't necessarily mean like McDonald's or anything like that, but it's really like, you know, Thai food. We love our Asian fusion here in New Zealand, Indian, all of that good stuff. So I'm talking about the whole repertoire of takeouts. I also found it really hard coming back to New Zealand because I was craving bread with every meal. Every single meal. It's like you need a tartine in the morning, you need a little bit with a bout de pain with your lunch, and you need it with your dinner as well. And it just becomes a staple, it just becomes almost a comfort. And the bread in New Zealand isn't as good. It's not the same thing. And when you're eating more New Zealand food and New Zealand cooking and snacking more often and that kind of stuff from that culture, you can't also have bread with every single meal, like 2 + 2, like it does not go together. So that's definitely a sign that you're becoming French, is that you can justify having bread or crave having bread with every single meal. Another sign that you're becoming French is that your politeness is definitely on point and you're used to saying hello to people everywhere. So we all know that in France, unless you start with bonjour, people may be quite resistant to talking to you, to helping you, all of that kind of stuff. You've got to say the magic word, which is bonjour. You say it when you enter the waiting room at the dentist, at the doctor. You say it when you enter that lift, that elevator. You say it all the time whenever you encounter someone in the same room as you, or when you enter a shop, that kind of thing. You've got to say bonjour. And people are not used to it here, so to necessarily, I mean, you acknowledge the other person. If you're walking into an elevator, for example, you might like sort of smile and stuff, but to actually say hello, you can get some really strange looks. And definitely going into, you know, a quiet waiting room at your doctor's, for example, and I'll walk in and I'll be like, hello, and they'll be like, okay, like, is she the doctor, or is she calling me up? Like, why is this stranger speaking to me? So that's another sign that you're becoming French, is that bonjour, that hello is just built into you. It's an automatic reflex and you can't not do it. Another sign that you're becoming French is that your perception of beauty and fashion also changes, and you find yourself becoming a lot more classic in your approach. You appreciate well-tailored clothes that are well cut and simple colors, you know, black and white and quite neutral colors. And in terms of your makeup, less is more. In terms of your skin, what's on your skin, less is more. You know, you'd rather just put on some nice moisturizer, maybe a little bit of tinted moisturizer, not heavy concealer and foundation and that kind of thing. And you're definitely less experimental when it comes to hair and makeup. Now, you can see that I have definitely started going back to a little bit, you know, how I was before, and that I've always loved playing with makeup and colors in my my hair and that kind of thing. But even then still, I don't wear foundation. I'm not doing the whole like contour and blush and lip tint. And I also know that there's a lot of people my age, let's say, women in their late 20s, early 30s, and they're starting to do things like get filler and Botox and that kind of thing. And my perspective on that from being in France for so long is just to take care of yourself as much as possible, use high quality products, and age gracefully. Another sign that you're becoming French is that you find it a bit unnatural greeting people and not going in for la bise. Now, obviously with the pandemic and everything going on at the moment, French people aren't doing much of la bise either. But I find it really awkward when I meet someone, especially someone new, and I'm like, sort of like, you're like, oh, hi, nice to meet you. Hi, like, what do you do? Like, you don't shake hands? Like, that doesn't happen. Like, you just sort of wave or like awkwardly like, oh, yeah, cool, hi, nice to meet you, you know? I just find it really awkward. The la bise works for everyone because you do la bise to strangers, you do la bise to people you love, your in-laws, your family, your partner, all of that kind of stuff. Next up, you know that you're becoming French if you're getting pretty good at complaining. So complaining, critiquing, yes, acknowledging the good in things, but also acknowledging what could be better, what's not enough, how it could be different, what you didn't like about it, whether it be a film, whether it be a holiday, whether it be a person. There's always the positive and then the critique as well. It's sort of like things that you may usually keep to yourself in certain cultures, you can definitely just tell people whatever's on your mind. You can show your discontentment. And another way that you can show your French attitude is getting all fired up and opinionated about things, right? Ready to debate, ready to discuss, and just really being authentic and open about what your opinion is on a topic, not trying to beat around the bush, very straightforward, tell it like it is, especially when it comes to political topics as well. What I always found interesting with the French though is how they could have this massive debate about something and be, you know, not in agreement whatsoever with friends or with family, and then it settles down and it's completely cool and they're just like, cool, see you next week, and that kind of thing. Whereas if I have a full-on debate bordering on argument with someone about a clash in values or political opinion, it's like I like that person less. I know that's super intolerant, but it's just the truth. Whereas in France, in that way of life, that's normal. And so I have to kind of reel myself in sometimes because I realize I'm not in the same context, and I become French because I'll just, you know, be straight up with my opinion and I'll be like, oh, I'm not sure I agree with you, and that kind of thing. And I have to realize that people are a little bit more sensitive to that as well. And as well, Niels and I cannot agree on something and go into full debate mode and our friends think we're fighting. So that's also like another subtlety, and a sign that you might be becoming French is that you tell it how it is and you're not afraid to give your opinion. Now, another thing on the food is that you may be more open-minded food-wise if you have a little bit of that French spirit in you. And now this is not for my vegetarians or vegans watching this. So what I found in France is that I would eat different animals and different parts of animals that I would have never imagined before. And so what I mean by that are things like, you know, rabbit, are things like baby pigs, are things like pate, you know, so just very earthy, meaty things. And I just never tasted some of these things, some of these textures before. And yeah, saucisson even, and yeah, a lot of it is very good, but very meaty, this meat du terroir, you know, this like meat of the land, this kind of gamey meat. Duck as well, a lot of different varieties of duck that you can eat in 1,000 different ways. And so a sign that you're becoming French is trying this kind of stuff, maybe enjoying this kind of stuff, and actually getting used to it as a delicacy and learning to love that kind of meat, that kind of food. Another sign that you're becoming French is that you really value your holidays, your vacances. In France, it's very, very important to have several weeks off in a row, especially in August. You know, it was very, very common to have 3-4 weeks off in August, to have a few weeks off in February to go skiing, etc., etc. And of course, the system is structured in a way that that's actually possible. I remember at L'Oreal, I would get 39 days of paid leave, which is just incredible. So I could come back to New Zealand for a month, plus still have 19 days of leave to explore Europe. So it was incredible in that way, but it's very much in the culture as a philosophy. I mean, not everyone has that much leave. Some people have more, some people have less, but the minimum is 5 weeks. I think if you ask most French people if they'd prefer a salary bump or more holidays, they might lean towards more holidays, because for them balance is really important. And yes, you work hard, but what's the point if you can't enjoy, you know, long summers, time off with friends and family? It's very important to rest and recover in France. They have far less of this always on culture. So that attitude is a sign that you're becoming French, and that you'd rather have time and balance than just working harder for more money. Now, speaking about the word holidays in another sense, and I mean like Valentine's Day, Halloween, things like that, you also know that you're becoming French if you don't really care about that stuff so much. So I thought that I was the only girl in the world who had a French boyfriend who didn't care about Valentine's Day, and he was super unromantic and just didn't make any effort. He does do small things now, because, you know, meeting me halfway, that kind of thing. But it's not the big extravaganza. My expectations aren't that I'm going to be delivered 24 long-stemmed roses, plus be taken out to dinner, plus that. That's not a thing. So French people aren't so into these commercial holidays, I'd say. The one exception's more so been Christmas. Yes, there are lights and stuff. I think it's because it has more of a religious angle, and there are a lot of Catholics in France. So that one's still quite appreciated. And there's of course the Christmas markets in Strasbourg and that kind of thing. But in general, all of those sort of made up holidays like Valentine's Day and Halloween, you know that you're becoming French if that's not really that big of a deal, and it's not necessarily something that you're going to celebrate and get balloons and decorations or special food or gifts and that kind of stuff over. Things like that are a lot more subtle. You also know you're becoming French if you get very excited when you're outside of France and you hear your language. I love it when I can hear French people speaking French around me, because it just makes you feel connected somehow. Like when you hear that language, it kind of takes you back and can feel like home, especially if you've lived there for a while like I did. And speaking of the French language, you definitely know you're becoming French if you cannot stand anglicizing French words any longer. Like I cannot say croissant. Sorry, it's not gonna happen. Like I would rather say croissant and just come across as a dick. Like people will be like, okay, who does she think she is? Putting on that accent. But you just can't do it. You can't slaughter the language, like not all the time, not for simple words like that. Like we can't do it any longer. So yeah, you definitely know that you're becoming French if that kind of like croissant or moe and chandon and things like that, they make you cringe because you're a little bit like, oh, that's not how you say it. By the way, make sure you're subscribed, because in a few weeks I'm going to be doing a video on the French brand names that you're pronouncing wrong. Most likely, if you're not French, which I think will be quite a fun time. So you definitely want to be around for that one. Now, finally, last but certainly not least, a big sign that you're becoming French is that you go into any post office or any administrative situation when you're going to have to deal with people in charge of some kind of process or bureaucracy, ready to fight. Like you get yourself all psyched up, you're like a little pit bull, you're like, oh, come at me, like you've got all of your answers prepared. They asked you to bring 5 documents, you've bought 25, like bring it on, come at me, let's go. Like you're going into the boxing ring, like ding, ding, ding. And it's fine. And you find that you did not need to prepare quite so hard. I have been absolutely traumatized and scarred for life after living in France with all things administration. I mean, even when people say to me like Préfecture de Police de Paris, I'm like, oh, look, like bad times. And, you know, I have definitely encountered people at La Poste saying like, sorry, but your package is not here. And I'm like, well, I have a piece of paper saying that it's definitely here at this address. They're like, no, we just looked and it's not here. And I'm like, can you look again? And they're like, no, it's not here. and you just have to fight for it. And then you finally convince them to go back and have another look, and guess what? It's right there. So that's the kind of experience that you can have in France quite a lot, and it definitely toughens you up and it definitely gets you ready to fight any sort of administrative process whatsoever, maybe even unnecessarily. But if it ever was that difficult, or people were ever that confrontational or hard to work with in New Zealand, I'd definitely be ready. Cool guys, so I'd love to hear from you. What are some of the signs that you have that you are a little bit French in the soul, you've become French in some way, maybe you lived there, maybe you're an expat living there. Tell me a little bit more about the signs that you have that you are indeed becoming French. I'll definitely be checking out and responding to the comments down below, so I'm looking forward to that. And otherwise, I'll see you here next week on the Not Even French channel. A bientôt!